Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest developments here in Israel, throughout the region and beyond, with chief focus on the latest developments in the Gaza Strip particularly, it's always important to remember how the war began. 333 days ago, on October 7th of 2023, the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip launched a surprise onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 246 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 101 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. The subsequent day, on October 8th of last year, Iran practically joined the war by greenlighting its proxy in Lebanon to launch cross-border attacks against Israel. Subsequently, additional proxies have joined that war from Syria to Iraq to Yemen. Projectiles have been fired in masses, with thousands to follow, including from Iran proper on the night between the 13th and 14th, when the Islamic Republic launched roughly 320 projectiles directly towards Israel. Now, with the latest developments, of course, focused on the Gaza Strip, Mr. Oren, TV7's editor-at-large, is with me here in the studio. What can you tell us on the latest developments?
You know, Jonathan, the figure you just cited, 333, brought to mind the 444 days in which the American hostages taken by the so-called students at the Tehran embassy were held by Khomeini and only released the moment Ronald Reagan took over from Jimmy Carter. So hopefully the remaining Israeli hostages in Hamas captivity will not have to wait another 111 days or so. So yes, over the last several days, the focus within Israel was on the fate of the 101 hostages after 6 of them were brutally murdered by their Hamas captors. And this coincided with a new resolution, new decision by the Israeli Security Cabinet emphasizing that Israel will not budge from the Philadelphia corridor, separating Gaza from Egypt. And therefore, it seems as if right now the emphasis in Israel is on the internal developments in which there is quite a gap between Prime Minister Netanyahu and most of his ministers and Defense Minister Gallant, as well as the unelected security and military chiefs, and between segments of the Israeli public and the government regarding the fate of the hostages and whether Israel should agree to a ceasefire, which will include the release of Israeli hostages in return for Palestinian prisoners as part of a ceasefire, and this ceasefire will supposedly also bring about a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. Now, 2 points. One, there is renewed Hamas activity in the northern part of Gaza. Over the last several hours, the IDF spokesman issued 3 separate announcements regarding either operations against key operatives of Hamas in various parts of northern Gaza, and the revelation that a new offensive tunnel, which apparently did not reach the Israeli border but was close to it, was located and then destroyed, and it was very sophisticated with a sort of a railway inside it for transporting vehicles and missiles, which means that there is a resurgence of Hamas activity even in places where the IDF is nominally in control. One of the demands, of course, that Netanyahu put forward is that no one especially not armed people, should go back from southern Gaza through the so-called Netzarim or Nuseirat corridor to Gaza City and beyond. So apparently the IDF still has its work cut out for it in several sectors of Gaza. The other point is that in the West Bank, the operation against terror cells is still going on, and there were several terror attacks, again, both in the northern part, Samaria, as well as in the Hebron Mount region in South Judea.
Indeed, of course, Operation Summer Camps, very creative.
Indeed.
But nonetheless, we will touch on matters related to Judea and Samaria momentarily. It's interesting also to note that today we recorded TV7 Israel News, our daily news bulletin, which we started roughly 15 years ago, episode number 3,333. What does that mean? I don't know, but let's remain focused on topics at hand, and for that I'd like to turn first and foremost to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Mr. Marshall Billingsley, formerly a Deputy Secretary General of the NATO alliance, as well as an Undersecretary of the Treasury for combating terror finance, and last but not least, a senior fellow at Hudson Institute. It's good to see you, Marshall. I'd like to start by asking you to the American approach to the current state of play in the Gaza Strip. The Islamist Hamas on October 7th has kidnapped 33 Americans. Of them, of course, 7 remain in Hamas captivity to date, are unaccounted for. What can you tell us about American efforts to rescue them, alongside, of course, the other Israelis that remain there in horrendous conditions, in captivity, with an Islamist terrorist organization designated as such by the U.S. State Department in Washington?
Well, as near as I can tell, the Biden-Harris administration's approach has been to vacation at the beach, to come off of vacation and criticize Netanyahu for Hamas's decision to summarily execute the 6 hostages, including 1 U.S. citizen. And in the case of Governor Walz, to run away from the media when asked a question about this horrific attack. We have a significant leadership gap in the United States. It was mentioned the taking of the hostages in Tehran during the Carter administration. At that time, we did not have the kinds of capabilities we have today to effect hostage rescue, even unilaterally if necessary, in places like Gaza. That was in evidence with the botched Desert One rescue attempt, which led to the loss of quite a bit of life within our special forces. We now have those capabilities. In fact, during the Bush administration, I oversaw the civilian office responsible for those types of special operations. President Biden has military and intelligence capabilities at his disposal, which he has so far refused not only to employ, but apparently has refused Prime Minister Netanyahu's requests for such types of assistance.
Disheartening to hear that, but nonetheless, let's turn to our next guest, who formerly served as the chief of the intelligence directorate at Mossad, namely Brigadier General in Reserve Amnon Sofrin. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to ask about the obviously extensive efforts to rescue, first and foremost, the remaining hostages in the Gaza Strip, while simultaneously also applying additional pressure on the Islamist Hamas, militarily speaking, and eradicating, as part of the mission at hand, Hamas's military and governing capabilities. Is Israel capable of maintaining all of those different objectives in parallel in a manner that at the same time requires the calculus that Hamas at any given time could murder additional hostages and could project additional obstacles or establish additional obstacles to ongoing negotiations that ultimately aim to bring all of the hostages back to Israel?
Let me answer, let's say, step by step. The first one is regarding the military situation or military capabilities of Hamas. The organized battalions of Hamas were destroyed, all of them, or most of them. At least two of them are still valid in the area of Deir al-Balach and Nusrat, that were almost unattacked because of certain reasons. Nevertheless, if at the beginning of this war we had 24 formations of Hamas battalions, now at least most of them, 22, 21, 23, depends who you ask, are destroyed. But Hamas is not, as an organization, has not been destroyed or eliminated because it changed its form of fighting, and now it creates small squads that fight in a guerrilla mode of fighting, making use of many weapon systems and many bombs that were left in the area, unexploded, and they can make use of that, draw from that explosives, and begin producing their own capabilities and getting out of the tunnels, launching rockets, anti-tank missiles, whatever, and of course trying to lay some what we call side charges wherever they can. And this is the mode of fighting that can go on forever. It cannot be eliminated, just like we did on the first phase of this war, of the ground maneuver. The second phase of regarding the what we call civilian administration, it is still controlled totally by Hamas. There's no other facility or other entity that can take over right now, because Israel didn't decide yet who is going to allow to do that. And all the proposals that were raised by the what we call defense establishment, meaning to bring what we call the new or revised Palestinian Authority from Judea and Samaria, or to establish what we call local management or civilian management in certain areas, like bubbles, and begin connecting them. None of that was approved by the cabinet, by the security cabinet. And that means that as long as we don't have any capability to control Gaza on the civilian side, the fact is that Hamas is controlling whatever is being done in Gaza. They pay salaries to their own people. They get hold of each convoy that gets off with humanitarian aid, and they decide who gets what, and they sell it in high prices, and by that, they get more income. The third issue is regarding the people abducted and held by Hamas and other organizations, because we don't know exactly how many people are under the control of Hamas and how many are on other organizations, or even maybe private civilians. The fact is that Hamas doesn't want any, right now, it is consistent with its demands to stop the war, to get what we call international guarantees, and the withdrawal of IDF from Philadelphia corridor, from Netzarim corridor, and all the presence in Gaza totally. Now, as long as it is not being implemented, Hamas still holds all the cards in his hands. If you want to be more accurate, 101 cards is in his pocket, and he can apply pressure on Israel, and they try to apply pressure on the Israeli society. The brutal murder of these 6 people, that the bodies were brought home at the end of this week, is a symbol to what they try to make an effort to apply pressure on the Israeli society, that it in turn will apply pressure on the government, just like it happened on Saturday and Sunday and Monday, that people are out in the street demonstrating and calling for a deal to release the people back home and so on.
Indeed. Well, I'd like to revert back to Mr. Billingsley and ask you particularly, since Mr. Oren mentioned that one of the key aspirations of the Biden administration, which is spearheading the negotiations to ultimately bring about some sort of outline for an arrangement between the Islamist terrorist organization Hamas and Israel, is to alleviate tensions, to bring an end to the war in Gaza that would ultimately also impact and de-escalate the situation in Lebanon. Nevertheless, when we're looking at the current situation on the Lebanese front, to establish a true reality in which Israelis would feel not only a sense of security, but confidence to return to their communities would be the full implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701. And therefore, is it realistic to expect a certain cessation of hostilities in Gaza to then also take effect somehow in Lebanon?
Not necessarily. It depends on what the taskmasters in Tehran really want to achieve. Let's be very clear here. At the root of all of this is the Ayatollah and the mullahs that rule around him in the dictatorship in Tehran. Under the Biden-Harris administration, Iran has yet again become flush with cash. Their GDP, their gross domestic product, has almost doubled since we left office. When you look at the oil exports alone, this year they're going to make more than $50 billion. And that accounts for roughly 70% of the Iranian state budget, of which a huge portion is devoted to funding the terror apparatus that the Quds Force has established in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Yemen, and so on and so forth. You have to target that funding stream. Now, I noticed that in the Israeli press recently, the security forces have emphasized the need to dry up terror financing in Gaza and the West Bank, and that's exactly the right approach. But that is insufficient if you don't tackle the massive funding stream that Iran is now getting from its oil exports.
Indeed. Mr. Owen, you also mentioned earlier Judea and Samaria. Of course, one of the reasons that pressured Hamas to launch its onslaught on October 7th was the Operation Wastebreaker that was very effective against both Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, particularly in the northern Samaria region of the so-called West Bank. But now we see that the Iranians are nonetheless very successful in flooding the West Bank throughout its various districts, including in northern Samaria in particular, but also in Judea and the Jordan Valley, with additional funds and weaponry, forcing basically the defense establishment to make its calculus and to ramp up the battle intensity against those terror cells in those applicable territories that we refer to. What can you tell us about that, and to what degree are we to expect a certain even escalation, if you will, before the soon-to-be once again looming holidays this upcoming months?
Well, actually, we have a much better authority here in Dr. Amnon Sofrin.
We will turn to him very soon.
Who used to be the intelligence officer of the Central Command,
right?
Israel's Central Command, not CENTCOM, in the mid-1990s. And the difference between what happened at that time in the run-up to the peace treaty with Jordan and right after it was that the cooperation between the security forces of the Hashemite kingdom and the Judean kingdom and of the state of Israel was that there was no concentrated effort on the part of the Palestinian organizations to penetrate westward from Jordan into the Israeli-held Jordan Valley and beyond. And right now, because of what you mentioned, because of the Iranian effort on transshipping weapons, munitions, directions, money from Iran via Iraq, Syria, and Jordan into the Israeli-held territory, what happens is that according to Nomi Neumann, who used to be the assessment chief of ISA of Shabak, there are 14 battalions A battalion is a bit exaggerated, but it means a formation of at least several dozen operatives, some affiliated with Hamas, some with other organizations, and some not affiliated but inspired. And they are working in Judea and Samaria. They are being supplied from outside. Sometimes they even produce their own explosives and munitions. Sometimes they can buy weapons smuggled or even sold by Israelis, shamefully. And they are posing quite a risk now, especially with some car bombs. This could be the return of the exploding buses, God forbid, in Israeli cities.
By Israelis, of course, referring to Israeli crime syndicates, not just ordinary Israelis upholding the law. But General Soflin, I'd like to hear your take on this, since obviously Iran already announced in November of 2014 via its Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei that the West Bank should be flooded with weaponry, and they were very public on the route to the annihilation of Israel, as he put it in one of his Twitter accounts that he already published and remains there to date, subsequently also establishing the Liwa Fatimiyun brigades, which includes, of course, the Afghan volunteers, Shiite volunteers to this brigade, which is obviously a lot larger than just a brigade, but also the Liwa Zainabiyun brigades with Pakistani volunteers from the Shiites, utilizing them in collaboration with the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan, which utilizes, of course, crime syndicates to transfer weaponry into Judea and Samaria. Is there a way to turn off the stream, so to speak, in a more creative way, and not just deal with the issue at hand, but rather with the root causes of those problems?
I think that we are a little bit late. And let me refer to the whole issue of what happens in Judea and Samaria. As you mentioned before, Ayatollah Khamenei told Ismail Haniyeh and Salah al-Aruri about a few years ago that the Judea and Samaria should be flooded with weapon systems because Israel is going to be defeated from Judea and Samaria. Most from all. And Salah al-Aruri began establishing and organizing all these formations in Judea and Samaria. Now, at the beginning, at the 11 or 10 months from October 7, 2023, and up about a month or a month and a half ago, the IDF efforts were concentrated on what we call the northern part of Samaria only. And we were sure that someday, even the area of Judea, which is from Bethlehem to Hebron, is going to be ignited, and they will take an active part, and that's what happens right now. If you look at the events of the last week, 3 car bombs in this area of Judea, the 3 officers, or so 3 policemen that were killed or murdered by a terrorist from Idna in the same area, for coming in the area of Tarkumiya. That means that we are now going southwards. That means that first of all, we have to fight all over this country, meaning in Judea and Samaria simultaneously. You can't go step by step and leave it because people are going to be hurt and killed just like it happened this week. And fortunately, this week ended up with only 3 people killed and not many more, because the explosive cars or the bombing cars were prepared and had the potential of causing a huge damage and killing a lot of people. Now, it comes from both sides. It comes, first of all, the knowledge comes from Gaza. And we find out in Judea and Samaria, and especially in Samaria area, we found out labs that produce weapon systems, that produce rockets. We found the beginning of digging the tunnel from Judea, from the area of Samaria into our area, meaning to the other side of the border. And we see the knowledge coming especially exactly from Gaza. It's a duplicate. And we know and we have enough knowledge to understand that the transfer of knowledge and transfer of technology has been going on simultaneously or smoothly from Gaza to Judea and Samaria for many months ago. Now, we have to be very careful right now because we have to invest a lot of units or to deploy a lot of units to engage all these terror cells or terror formations in Judea and Samaria. And as long as it goes on, that means that we have to remove units from place to place, meaning instead of sending more units into Gaza, we will have to send it to Judea and Samaria, or even from the Lebanese border. And this is the main aim of this effort coming out by the direction of the Iranians.
Thank you, General Sofrin. I'll stop you here because we have roughly 45 seconds for this. Marshall, you dealt with this directly, obviously, like General Sofrin. What should Israel do on the broad scale? What would you recommend? Really, 45 seconds, no more than that.
We need to be prepared to strike the Iranian nuclear facilities. That is the existential threat that looms over all of this. Just as Iran has been flush with cash and is able to afford funding its terror apparatus, they've also bankrolled a nuclear breakout capability. And they've now put half a foot across that threshold towards weaponization.
Well, loud and clear. This is all the time that we have for today, however, so I'd like to immediately thank Mr. Billingsley, General Sofrin, and Mr. Oren for all of your insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at TV7israelnews.com.